lawyers, and the practice of law. The law and lawyers have been around for almost as long as the human race has. The well-known expression, the law of Medes and Persians, comes from the reign of King Darius of Babylon. Now, King Darius was king of Babylon around 530 BC. So the expression, the law of Medes and Persians, comes from as long as 530 BC. That is a very long time ago. But even then, the law and lawyers were clearly around. King Solomon was one of the most famous kings of the kingdom of Israel. He was, by all accounts, a remarkably clever person. King Solomon was, in particular, known as a very wise judge. The interesting thing, though, is that he lived approximately 900 years BC. So we had a very wise judge all the way back in history to 900 BC. So the law and lawyers have been around, well, almost forever, it seems. What is very interesting, though, is that parts of ancient law are still very relevant today. Long before the year count changed from BC to AD, the Romans had developed a highly sophisticated legal system. The ancient Roman legal system still forms, to this very day, the basis of the legal systems of most Western European countries. That is quite a remarkable fact. Newer clearly is not always better. If you are an attorney or a candidate attorney, you are, of course, also a lawyer, or at least a lawyer in training. As a lawyer, you are in some remarkable company. Did you know the following people were lawyers? Former US President Barack Obama. Former US First Lady Michelle Obama. Former South African President Nelson Mandela. He was also a boxer enthusiast and a fitness enthusiast. Former Indian liberation leader Mahatma Gandhi. Did you know that he and Winston Churchill were both involved in the Battle of Spienkhof right here in South Africa in 1899? Gandhi was a stretcher bearer and Churchill was a war correspondent. Former UK Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. Former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani, who famously led New York through the devastation caused by the 9/11 terror attacks. Former US President Bill Clinton. Oh yes, he also plays the saxophone, by the way. Former anti-apartheid activist Bram Fischer. Legendary Anglo-Boer War scout Denny Theron. Former Proteas wicket-keeper Dave Richardson. And then there are lawyers who became legendary purely from the practice of law. People like the Wim Trengrovs of this world. People like the Michael Katzes of this world. People like Judge Museneges of this world. His story is actually pretty amazing. Google his story, it is worth knowing. And people like our current Chief Justice, Mogoeng Mogoeng. My name is Nosipho Mkhize. I'm one of your tutorial presenters here at Impumelelo Training.
Of course, actual practicing law is not as glamorous as it looks on television. A real lawyer's life is nothing like what we see in The Good Wife, Suits, and How to Get Away with Murder. Being a lawyer is often lonely, challenging, and demanding. That is particularly true for South Africans' young lawyers. By young lawyers, I mean South African lawyers who are younger than 36 years of age. During 2018, the Law Society of South Africa conducted a young lawyer survey. This survey highlighted some of the challenges that South Africa's young lawyers face today. Here are some of the interesting results from the survey. Did you know that most young lawyers work in Gauteng, the Western Cape, or KwaZulu-Natal? Most young lawyers do not work at South Africa's big or medium-sized firms. In fact, most young lawyers work at firms that have 5 or less attorneys. Some young lawyers are being paid very low salaries. Also, a lot of young lawyers expect that they will open their own law firms within the next 3 years or so. Young lawyers sent a very clear message in the survey that they have a desperate need for practical training. Sadly, a lot of young lawyers cannot afford to pay for the practical training that they need. Some young lawyers practice on their own. As a result, they cannot afford to spend time out of the office on training. The training that South Africa's young lawyers need must be practical and relevant to their daily legal lives. The training that South Africa's young lawyers need must be affordable. The training that South Africa's young lawyers need must be accessible online. That way, South Africa's young lawyers can access the training at times that fit in with their daily jobs. My name is Masha van Vieren, and I'm very excited to be one of the training presenters here at Impumelelo Training.
Who then is Impumelelo Training? Who are we and what do we do? Most of us here at Impumelelo Training are either admitted South African attorneys or South African candidate attorneys. Almost all of us are in full-time practice, which means that we have real day jobs. Impumelelo Training is a venture that we pursue in our spare time. We have realized that there's a massive gap between law school or university and actually working in the legal field. Simply put, there's a massive gap between getting a law degree and doing worthwhile articles of clerkship. Very few of South Africa's young lawyers are or have been taught the core basic legal and professional skills that our law firm employers expect from us. We plan to change that for good. We are going to make a series of tutorials available online for South Africa's young lawyers. These tutorials will start with the most basic professional skills. And then, tutorial by tutorial, we will put the building blocks in place, always building upwards on your skill set. Just like one builds a house, we are going to give you a good basic foundation. And then, tutorial by tutorial, build on that as we tackle more complex subjects, always step by step. Our online tutorials will deal with the fundamentals that every South African attorney or candidate attorney should have been taught, but sadly, almost never was. Why are we doing this? Well, personally, I'm doing this as a contribution towards making a real change for my fellow candidate attorneys and also for my own personal growth. Earlier today, my fellow presenter Tony Khumalo caught up with Francois Blanche. Francois is the founder of Impumelelo Training.
Good day, my name is Tony Khumalo. I have my own law firm called Tony Khumalo Attorneys. I specialize in civil litigation, family and divorce law, labor law, and criminal law. Lately, I have become quite interested in entertainment law, and I'm working hard on expanding that component of my practice. Today, I am with Francois Blanche, the founder of Impumelelo Training.
Hi Tony.
Hi Francois.
Very well.
I'm good, and yourself?
Very well, thank you.
Yes, tell us a bit about your experience as a lawyer.
Tony, I've been practicing for a better part of 25 years. I was admitted as a South African attorney way back in 1996.
Oh wow.
And I've practiced in the biggest South African firms, I've practiced in the smallest South African firms. But the constant theme has always been corporate and commercial law. That is what I do.
Okay.
And then in 2001, I got an opportunity to go work in London. And I worked at a firm called Freshfields Brookhouse Deringer.
Okay.
And to put it in context, there were 2,000 people in that office of that firm in London.
Oh wow.
Which is just
Okay.
massive. And it was just a complete eye-opener because I got to see how the UK lawyers are trained,
Okay.
how their juniors are developed, how they bridge that gap from end of law school to doing what they call traineeship, what you and I would call articles. I got quite interested in all of that, and eventually I wrote something called the Qualified Lawyers Transfer Test. By some miracle I passed the thing, so I'm now...
Oh, impressive.
Thank you. I'm now a solicitor of England and Wales, but I practice as a South African lawyer.
Okay. And then tell us, why did you decide to start Impumelelo Training?
It's always been playing on my mind, but increasingly so over the last couple of years. 25 years ago, when I left law school and I walked into the first firm that I was articled to,
Okay.
I realized that the 6 years that I'd spent at university had not equipped me for what I was about to face.
Okay.
And 25 years later, you ask any candidate attorney in South Africa, they will say exactly the same thing. Nothing has changed.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, we've gone backwards. If you look at one of your co-presenters, Nosipho, if you look at her class of what was now 2017, out of her entire LLB graduation class, only 40% of the law graduates managed to secure articles. That means 60% just fell by the wayside, straight off the bat. Of that 40%, many have ended up in firms where, yes, they've got articles, but the firms are just not equipped to train them practically.
Yes.
That's just a fact of life. So unless you end up in one of the mega firms, which has got the luxury of training people because of their business model, most of us mere mortals pray and spray and get by. And we can go round and round and argue whether it's the responsibility of the Department of Justice, or the universities, or the legal profession, or the Legal Practice Council. We'll be arguing in 25 years' time again.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, with the help of people like yourself and your co-presenters, we decided do something. It's not going to be perfect, but it's a damn shot better than doing nothing.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's basically where we come from. We realize that there's a huge, fundamental, basic skill set shortage. And that is where we're going to come in. It's not about teaching somebody intellectual property law. It's about how to practice law. And that is where we're going to get in. And from my side, very excited about it. It is hard work, as you know.
Absolutely, yeah.
But then, been very fortunate. We've got a fantastic team together. Yourself, Nosipho, Marsha, Puseletso,
Yes.
Simeon, Witness and their team. I don't think we could have asked for a better team to do this. And I think what people should just realize is this is voluntary.
Yes.
These guys are giving their time and their efforts to try and make this work.
Yes.
So very excited from my side, and from me personally, Tony, thank you so much for being involved in this program.
No, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for getting me involved.
That is certainly my pleasure. Thank you.
You will be able to access our tutorials online whenever it suits you, which means you can fit the tutorials into your own lifestyle. Some of the tutorials will be available free of charge. Some of the tutorials will have a reasonable price tag though, but you will find that both the freely available tutorials and the paid for tutorials are really well worth it.
By now you should be wondering what these tutorials are actually going to deal with. To help explain that to you, I am joined by my fellow presenter, Masha. Hi Masha.
Hi Tony, how are you doing?
I'm good, and yourself?
I'm very well, thank you. Can I just compliment you on your beautiful dress firstly?
Oh, thank you.
And Tony, you're a lawyer, but except for that, don't you have your own fashion line?
Actually, that's correct. I do have a fashion line. It's called Tony by Tony Kumalo. It's designed specifically for the professional working women, and this is from my line as well. And you look stunning yourself as well.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Let's take a look at what the first series of tutorials are going to deal with. One of the first tutorials is all about doing articles of collection under the new Legal Practice Act. Tell us a bit more about that.
In that tutorial, we make sense of how articles of clerkship, the attorney's admission exam, and ultimately your admission as an attorney now work under the new Legal Practice Act. This is obviously very relevant for candidate attorneys. But it is actually just as relevant for the attorneys to whom the candidate attorneys are articled. The whole idea with that tutorial is to bring together, in a simple, understandable way, the essence of what legal practitioners must know about articles, without having to slog through the entire Act, the regulations, the rules, the code of conduct, and the relevant case law by oneself.
Another tutorial is all about do's and don'ts in the professional and corporate environment. Somebody had told me that.
That is a really important tutorial. In that tutorial, we deal with those critical forms of conduct that you must always apply in the workplace. Or in some cases, never ever apply in the workplace. It is essential and critical guidance for any young professional.
And then we move on to the basic written communication skills.
Yes, that is right, Tony. That is another really important tutorial. It doesn't matter how good a writer or user of words you are. Practicing law requires a very particular mindset when it comes to communication in writing. Whether you are writing an email or crafting a contract, drafting a will or drafting pleadings. That is a critical important tutorial there.
Absolutely.
For it is the foundation of so many of the other tutorials that will follow after it. Unless you have made the lessons given under that tutorial your own, you may struggle a bit with some of the later tutorials.
There is another future tutorial that sounds interesting. Basic verbal communication skills, or actually face-to-face interaction.
This is both a fun tutorial and an important one. In that tutorial, we look at essential face-to-face communication skills, but we also look at appropriate dress sense, particularly for the lady viewers. And of course, we can get some fashion tips there, Tony.
Absolutely.
We also look at how to meet and greet before a meeting and again when the meeting is over. We look at very practical examples of how to conduct yourself in a meeting and how not to conduct yourself. We also touch on cultural differences between some of South Africa's people and how that can so easily be misunderstood in the workplace. This is a very practical tutorial and definitely one worth watching at least twice.
Tell us a bit about what else we can expect from the first series of tutorials.
So first of all, we're going to look at attorneys' ethical rules, what every attorney and candidate attorney should know. Secondly, we are going to demystify commercial law a bit and see what it is really about. Then, the National Credit Act impacts on so many aspects of our daily lives and our practices. So it's only right that we take a closer look at the NCA. Then, there is the tutorial on a topic that will be one of interest to a lot of our viewers, some basic pointers to starting your own firm. After that, we'll take it from there, depending on what feedback and requests we receive.
We put a lot of time and effort into preparing the tutorials. What value you are going to get out of the tutorials is entirely up to you. Personally, I think you should treat the tutorials as if you are attending a good seminar. In other words, make notes of the points that you find important. Watch the tutorial again as many times as it takes, until you are comfortable that you'll remember its content. Otherwise, the tutorials will be like a good speech or a good sermon. You know it was very relevant and informative, but you cannot remember the actual detail. At the end of this tutorial, we will give you details of how you can contact us, and very importantly, where you can send your comments or questions on the tutorials to us. Every now and then, we will hold live webinar sessions. At that webinar, We will deal with your queries and comments. The webinars will be live, interactive sessions. Don't miss them. We look forward to seeing you in our next tutorial. Until then, it is goodbye from me, Nosi Pumkize.